know the why human trafficking work is needed, to fight for the freedom of modern-day slaves. But love, passion, commitment isn't all you need to be an effective and successful anti-trafficking advocate. Learn the how. I'm Dr. Celia Williamson, Director of the Human Trafficking and Social Justice Institute at the University of Toledo. Welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast, where I'll provide you with the latest and best methods, policy, and practice discussed by experienced experts in the field so that you can cut through the noise, save time, and be about the work of saving lives. Before we start this episode, I want to tell you about our exciting annual conference coming up in September.
The International Human Trafficking and Social Justice Conference is the largest and oldest academic conference on human trafficking in the nation. Join us for our 17th annual conference, hosted virtually on September 23rd through the 25th. Now you can join thousands of advocates, researchers, experts, and survivors from all over the world in the comfort of your own home. Find out more information and register today on our website, traffickingconference.com.
Welcome to the Emancipation Nation podcast. Kibrianna Jones' journey in the sex trafficking world began at the tender age of 17. This was her life until 21 years old when she was arrested and sent to prison for conspiracy to the same crime in which she was a victim. Now she's starting back, but now with a felony. And even worse, the label of sex offender. So she is now in the same category as a rapist, as a sexual predator. Kibrianna is part of a group of people seeking clemency from the government against this. Growing up, her dream was to become a veterinarian because of her passion for animals. Now, even with the certification in veterinary assisting, she has turned away from job interviews because of her background. Because she has survived so many traumas, she knew she was capable of overcoming this. She decided in the meantime to open a pet supply business selling collars and leashes and specializing in products to cut, bathe, and engage in pet maintenance. And cut this time in half while allowing the owners of their furry family members to spend more good time with their pets. Kibrianna eventually plans to expand her business and have a physical location so she can employ other minority women with backgrounds that society has thrown away and other young women who've been on the same journey and need a helping hand. Thank you for being here with us today, Kibrianna.
Thank you, Celia. I really appreciate this.
Yes, and you're amazing. You just were released this April, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you became a victim of human trafficking and then how you were sentenced to prison?
It started when I was 17 years old. I was introduced into this lifestyle. It was by a mutual friend. This was an older friend. She was an exotic dancer at one of the local nightclubs. I was 17. She was about 21, 22. She asked me to go with her one day to one of her customers from work there at their house. So when I went there, the guy, he saw me and he pulled her to the room and she came back and she was like, do you want to make some money? So I asked her, what does she mean by that? And she basically just told me, just go in the room with this guy with me and he's going to pay us. So not wanting to make her like, how do I put that? I didn't, it was like peer pressure and I didn't want her to be, mad at me or anything, like seeking validation. So I went along with it. And that was my first time doing that. Later on, I turned 18 and well, excuse me, that year when I was 17, I ended up meeting a guy. He was a local neighborhood drug dealer and he was 10 years my senior. And I guess you can say I fell in love. He made it to where if I needed him, he was always available. Um, Money, he gave me money. He made sure like I had places to stay, all of that good stuff. He always made himself available to me and as like he was taking care of me.
Mm-hmm.
So when I turned 18, I hadn't dealt with him in a while and I moved on with life. And when I turned 18, I found myself in on hard times.
But let me ask you, Kibriana, where was your family during this time, and even before you turned 17? Was your family there? Were you involved in with your family?
Yes, I was raised by my family. I grew up Jehovah's Witness. So I grew up in a really strict environment and a strict religion, but ended up dropping out of school. I was in 10th grade. Um, they figured that they would take me out of school so that I can be closer to the religion. I was having some behavioral problems in school.
Why do you think you were having behavioral problems in school?
I was being molested by a family member and I never told them.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that I never told them is I have an older sister. We're 17 years apart. And I was born when she was in her senior year of high school. So growing up, I remember her and my mother always had strain in their relationship. And this was due to the fact that when my sister was younger, the same thing happened to her with a family member. And when she told my mother, for the sake of family, kind of swept it under the rug and just dealt with it within the family. And then my sister was still, forced to go to his family functions and things that he was celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got older and it happened to me, I figured what's the point of telling them because I saw how my mother and my sister's relationship was and why am I going to go through that embarrassment? So
Mm-hmm.
that's what caused me to lash out and act out and things like that. And eventually they did take me out of school for lack of better terms to get me closer to the religion, thinking that that was the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I still ended up rebelling. So I ended up hanging around older people. That's, I look to those older people for validation. Like in the religion, you're not encouraged to go to like do school activities. I wasn't allowed to play sports. I wasn't allowed to like go to prom or homecoming, things of that sort. So I can say that kind of affected, my childhood growing up and not being involved in school activities so I can gain friends from school and have that type of support and foundation. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that played a part in all of that as well.
And then when you reached the age of 18, did you get reintroduced again to this older man?
Yes, what happened was I was at a party and I was drinking. I ended up going to sleep and I woke up and two guys were on top of me having sex with me. I didn't know how long that was going on for when it started. I ended up filing a police report. They both went to jail. When I met with prosecutors, the prosecutor wanted me to tell him when suspect A penetrated me and when suspect B penetrated me. And at the time I woke up and suspect A was penetrating me, but the other person was on the side messing with my top area, with my breast area.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured dealing with that wasn't enough information for them. I guess it wasn't like a case of I'm walking down the street and I get attacked,
Mm-hmm.
So dealing with that and not getting the justice in that, they took me in a deep depression.
So
And
they did not they did not pursue the case. They didn't go forward
No,
with
they dropped the
prosecution.
charges.
Oh my God. And so then
So,
you got depressed.
and
And
I started using drugs to cope.
mhm.
And I told my family about it. And I remember my father, he told me, he was like, why would you, I called him as soon as I left the sheriff's office. And he told me, he was like, why would you put yourself in that situation? So with him saying that, it made me feel like that was, all my fault. And I held on to that for years. It wasn't until a few years later that after rehabs and everything that I spoke to him about it, and he finally apologized, and he told me he really didn't know how to handle the situation. But based on his comments and how they reacted, that's when I really needed them for the support, and
Absolutely.
I didn't get that. So looking back on it now, I understand that's why I used drugs to cope, but that wasn't registering in my mind at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they looked at it was I was just out living a life, living a worldly life, or just living how I want to live. No one took that under consideration. So
Wow.
now I find myself homeless at this time. My parents wouldn't allow me to come back home after my rape and everything. And
They said you were raped and so do not come back home, or
not
because
because
they
of my partying and the drug use and
okay.
everything. All of this happened within less than a month.
And they blamed you because you were out living the worldly life, they say.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Like, it is a very strict religion. It really is. So I wasn't allowed to come back home. So I found myself homeless. And at that time, the guy that I met when I was 17, who was 10 years my senior, he was always there as usual. And he offered me a place to stay. And when I got there, I realized he wasn't a drug dealer anymore, just a drug dealer. He had other young women working for him, and he ran an escorting service.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got there, he kept me in different hotel rooms. And at the beginning, it was just drive them to whatever calls they have. And that's all you have to do. So I figured, okay, well, I have a place to live. I have a place to stay. I'm going to be able to have, food provided and everything. So this seems pretty ideal. That didn't last long. Soon it was, you have to earn your keep. And that's when he slowly started bringing me into that lifestyle and telling me this is what you're going to have to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I started working as well. He had like about 11 to 12 other different young girls that was
Mm-hmm.
working for him. And he would send us out to different parts of Florida. Our home base was Cocoa Beach, Florida. So for like a week or so, he would send 2 girls to Orlando, 2 girls to Miami, 2 girls to Gainesville. Um, and then we would have to Western Union him the money. I would leave and then I ended up going to rehab, but he would always find me in my rehabs and try and just reel me back in. So it wasn't until he went to prison for a drug case that I was finally able to like be free of him and start my life over. So I went to rehab again and I completed that one. I got a job. I was working. I had my own apartment. I was living in Miami and everything was going good. I ended up losing my job. When I lost my job, I didn't have a way to pay for my bills. So I went back to that life. And in my mind, it was just for just a month or just 2 months. And I'm just going to do this, make some quick money and get out. Because my plan was I wanted to start school. So I ended up meeting back up with the girl that I went to rehab with. When I went to a rehab and me and her became friends. So we started working together. the reason why I felt more comfortable working with another woman in that lifestyle, like, you always have to be accountable. So I've had other pimps along the way after a little bit after that guy and in between and things like that. So I didn't want to go and subject myself again to that type of pressure and everything, but I still wanted to be accounted for, because when you go on a date or you go on a call, you're not guaranteed to come back.
Mm-hmm.
You're not guaranteed for your family, your friends to see you again. So I felt more comfortable working along with another girl. I knew my money wasn't going to get taken. I wasn't going to get abused. So me and her started working together.
Mm-hmm.
A little while later, I ended up, like, through the network of our friends, a lot of my associates and, you know, people I was dealing with, all of them were escorts or were working at strip clubs and stuff. So sometimes when I would travel and things like that, I would stay with a friend, or when they would come into town, they would stay with me. So, like I said, it was just a network of different people, and we just all knew each other through that life.
Mm-hmm.
We ended up getting introduced to this one girl. She needed a place to stay, so I offered my home to her. So she was there. She had been there for like a week or so, and my house was always like the house I would always take people in whenever they needed to stay. I was always the couch you could come and crash on. When she got there, like I said, she was there for about a week, and it was just something about her wasn't really adding up. So I went and I sat down with her and I talked to her, and I finally asked her, I was like, what's going on with you? What's your story? A lot of times I can tell you a lot of my friends in that lifestyle, I didn't even know their real name. Like, we never went by real names or anything like that. Even to, like, go and get a hotel room, like, that was the only time I would probably see what their ID read and stuff. Like, it was just that type of deal. You didn't really ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally sat down and I talked to her, and she told me that she was 17, about to turn 18. Later on, I ended up finding out that she was actually 16. So, and this was all within the span of a day. And I told her, you can't really be here because this is, what we're doing. Now, granted, I didn't introduce her to this. This was something that she was already doing, and I just offered her a place to stay. But
Mm-hmm.
I told her she had to go. So I remember she had me drop her off to some house. And my friend who I was working with, I was 21 at this time, and my friend who I was working with from the rehab, she was 21 as well. She still kept in contact with her through Facebook and stuff, I guess, to make sure she was okay and things of that sort. So about maybe 4 months passed, 3 or 4 months passed, and my neighbor, who was also my drug dealer at the time, before he had ended up going to jail a few months back, and now he was out of jail. And so he asked me if he can come and stay at my place for a while. So I thought it wouldn't be long. I thought it would be maybe like a month or so until he got on his feet, and I allowed him to come stay. He was almost 40 years old, and I was just 21. When he got there, I would say maybe like he ended up staying longer than a month, and then our relationship became sexual. And then next thing you know, as soon as we started having sex, that's when the abuse came.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's beating me. He's not paying any of my bills. He's not offering to help on rent. And I'm giving him money thinking that that will help him move out quicker. I'm thinking that this is helping him, but really he's looking in hindsight, he was taking advantage of me the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of all of this, he would leave and come back, and because we would fight and we would argue, and then it was times that he's beat me unconscious, and I've called the cops. Like, before, we would be getting into an argument, and I knew at this point, because I was getting hit on a daily basis at this time, so I knew, it's like I knew in my mind right then and there, okay, you about to get hit, this about to happen. I wouldn't like to call the cops because I didn't want to deal with that, and then I didn't want to get him in trouble. And it was like, I'm looking back on it now, I was just so much concerned about him rather than myself, and I kept thinking it's going to get better. My friend was still there with me, and she would be like, we got to call the cops sometimes. The one time that I did call the cops in the middle of one of his outbursts, he beat me unconscious. So when the cops came, they came, knocked on my door, and I couldn't even open the door. I didn't even know that they had came. I came to probably a few hours later, and I called them back, and I asked them, I said, no one came to this address. They're like, yes, we did, ma'am. And she read the report. They heard dogs barking and stuff like that. I had 2 dogs. And that's another thing that he would do as well. If it were things that I didn't want to do, if I didn't want to get up at this time, or if I didn't want to do this, like, he would use my dogs against me. Like, I had a wiener dog, a Dachshund. It's been times he's choked my dog. He's thrown my dog across the floor. He's locked one of my bigger dogs. She's a Rottweiler. She's locked her in the cage and fed her ecstasy to try to make her mean, or if it was something that he wasn't happy that I did. It was a lot of emotional trauma that I was going through at that time, dealing with him. And I didn't know how to get out of it.
Lots of domestic violence, and lots of control and isolation. And so what eventually happened? How did you get away from him?
I didn't. So what happened was, like I said, we would argue, and sometimes he would leave, he would come back. It was a revolving door to my house. At that time, the girl that I had met a few months prior, she had contacted my friend, and she called us and she said, I don't have anywhere to go. Can I please come and stay for a few days? Now, at this time, I know how old she is, but I knew how it was when I was out there and I was young. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to just let her come over for a few days, so she has a safe place to be. That's what I'm thinking, that I can give her a safe place, not thinking that he's going to be involved in any of this.
Mm-hmm.
And he was away at that time. So I went and I got her, picked her up, and now she's at my house. He ended up showing up later. And a few days goes by, and we're all still working. All 3 of us are still escorting. And I guess he sees the money that's being made. So one night he goes to everyone and he's like, if y'all are going to stay here and y'all are going to do all of this, you're going to give me the money. He's talking about him. So both of them really don't have a place to go. So that's what everyone started doing. And I was already giving him my money to help him move out so I can get myself out of this situation, because I thought that would be the answer.
And were they doing that because they feared him, or how was he able to convince them?
Because the abuse did not just stop at me. It started extending to them.
Okay.
It went from my dogs, it went to them, and it went to me.
Okay.
Also, so what ended up happening was, like I said, around the times, like when it would get really bad, we started creating code words, me and my friends. So, because I would, in the middle of us yelling, like he's taking me outside and has pointed a gun at me in front of my neighbors and dared the neighbors to call the police. So this was a whole neighborhood. Like, he had the neighbors afraid of him, and no one's ever called the police on him. I've had a gun pointed in my face in my yard, and no one called the police. No one.
Wow.
So basically, I was like, okay, so if they're not going to help me, what's going on here? What ended up happening at that time, I said, we started making code words. So I told her, if it got really bad, it came to the point where I would just take the beatings. And if it got bad, I would say, okay, code pink. I would yell out the color pink, and that meant to call the police. We came up with that.
Mm-hmm.
It never happened, because I always would feel like I could take it. Like he didn't mean it. I was just so manipulated by him, Eventually, we would tell her friends what was going on. Her friends that wasn't there with us. They lived in a different part of Miami. So finally, I guess, she got tired of it. I was tired of it. So her friends are the one that actually notified the police. Um, the police, they started an investigation. At the beginning, she cooperated, 21-year-old cooperated, and the 16-year-old cooperated. They ended up kicking in my door. They searched my house, a search warrant and everything. Me and him were both arrested. When they came to my house, they were like, you need to consider yourself a victim here, Ms. Jones, because this is not right and we need your help in prosecuting this case.
Mm-hmm.
When it came time to talk to them, I was just so confused. Like, I didn't want anyone to, I guess, get in trouble. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was betraying him. I felt like I was betraying my friends. I felt like I was betraying myself. I didn't know what to do. And then the prosecutors, they weren't interested especially when they were talking to me, because I told you he sold drugs as well. So they wanted me to tell them where he was getting this supply of drugs from who he was selling this to. And those were things that I didn't know the answers to.
Mm-hmm.
So it just made me completely shut down. Like, what are y'all doing? Y'all really trying to help me, or are y'all just trying to build a case? So I ended up sitting there for 4 months before I decided to fully cooperate with the authorities. And
were you sat in jail? Did they hold you in
yes,
jail? Okay.
yes, I did. I didn't get a bond or anything. So when I finally cooperated with them, I guess, it kind of frustrated them from the beginning. And because you got to realize, like, these two people from my case, how am I trying to put this? I had a relationship to everyone involved in that situation. This is somebody that I was involved with on a physical and sexual level, and then they ended up being abusive toward me. And then these are people that are considered my friends. So I'm like, what am I to do?
Indeed. What are you to do? I hope you've been listening to this tragic story of Breonna Jones. Imagine an experience where you're molested by a family member and you don't speak up about it because you've seen this before. You've seen your older sister do it, and you see that relationship be permanently damaged. So you don't say anything. Imagine that you're blamed for your own rape by your father, rejected and abandoned by your family. The people that love you the most, or supposed to love you the most. You report your rape to the system, and they refuse to prosecute. You've got to imagine that your life doesn't mean much to anyone at that point. They don't care. You will receive no justice. Imagine that. What would you do? Would you use drugs to cope with your trauma of molestation and rape by more than one man? Imagine being homeless and young, nowhere to go, no support system, and you're scared, you're hungry. You'd use what you have to get money, wouldn't you? You'd partner up with someone that you think could keep you safe. You'd meet someone that eventually beats you, though. Not someone that slaps you as if that weren't bad enough, but someone so violent that being knocked unconscious is a regular occurrence, and beatings happen daily. Because in all that's happened in your life, others have told you time and time again, hell, they demonstrated it time and time again, that you are not worthy. Your family said it, your abuser said it, your rapist said it, and the criminal justice system said it. So you don't call the police. You worry more that others will be hurt, that they will be caught up in the process, including your abuser, because their life has value. You know this is the right move because even when a gun was put to your head outside in clear view of your neighbors, no one cared enough, just enough, to call the police on your behalf. It reaffirms that your life isn't worth much to anyone. Finally, though, arrests are made. Thank God, and you are in front of investigators, but who are most concerned with the drugs and the drug deals of your perpetrator and not your abuse. In fact, you annoy them, and so you shall sit in prison for 4 months until you have something meaningful to say. We have to remind ourselves that it's the vulnerable that become victims. The abused, the abandoned, neglected, the drug addicted, and those that suffer mental illness, all of which Brianna described about herself. So while we're out there marching through the village with our pitchforks to demand that we keep doubling down on stiffer and tougher and stronger laws, we have to remember we don't stop to think about the collateral damage. We don't stop to think about how we and our overzealousness causes damage. We cause damage when we rush to judgment. We cause damage when we don't scratch below the surface to learn about what our actions will do to those caught up in the damage we cause. In our rush to pass laws, we don't recognize our participation in the furtherance of someone's abuse. There is a sickness in the movement when we hurt the very thing that we're attempting to heal. It's dangerous when you have a little bit of knowledge and aren't willing to take the time to have a deeper understanding of the issue. Taking someone's freedom is at the core of what we fight against. We should exercise caution whenever we are contemplating the passage of laws that take freedom. Join us next week to find out more about Brianna's case and the clemency that she's asking for. Not only for herself, but her mission to help other women she met in prison who are being treated as criminals who are actually victims, and what we can do about it. Let's not just do something, let's do the best thing. If you like this episode of Emancipation Nation, please subscribe and I'll send you the weekly podcast. Until then, the fight continues.